Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of this, the Simply Christian podcast. A place where we can just slow down, jump into the life-giving waters of the scriptures, asking questions of the texts, maybe not having all the answers yet, but walking this journey together, step by step, as co-learners, explorers, adventurers, seeking out the one that is the centre of all things, Jesus Christ. I've called this episode In the Beginning, again, because that's where we're going to be, right back at the beginning, again. But this time, I've given it the subtitle, Genesis, Resurrection, and the Renewal of all things. So let's get started. Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 may be the greatest opening sentence ever written. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The Bible opens not with an argument, not with some New Age philosophy, nor with a list of rules, but with God bringing life where there was no life. Immediately we're told, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So straight away the story starts with 3 great themes: beginnings, God, and darkness. And out of that darkness, God begins creating. Now Genesis unfolds through 7 days of creation, and in the Hebrew mind, that's the people to whom this text was first written and first spoken to, the number 7 matters deeply. You see, it would have grabbed their attention immediately because they would have recognised its significance. Up till now, their history had been oral, stories handed down from generation to generation. So this is familiar. You see, the number 7 is the number of fullness. It's a number that speaks of completeness, of wholeness. To 7 something was to bring it to completion. So Genesis is not merely telling us that God created, it's telling us creation is whole, it is ordered, it's purposeful, sacred. We get day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 and day 5, and then on the 6th day we get the pinnacle of creation. God creates humanity. Let us make humanity in our image, after our likeness. Human beings are introduced as image bearers, living reflections of the Creator within creation itself. And here is an amazing thing. Jesus does not suddenly appear in Bethlehem in the New Testament. No. The Apostle John explains at the beginning of his Gospel, he opens with, "In the beginning was the Word." Meaning, when Genesis says, "and God said," Jesus is there, right at the beginning, because he is the Word, and in him is life. His is the voice speaking light into darkness. His is the voice speaking stars into existence. His is the voice breathing life into humanity. It's the same voice that will later call Lazarus out from a tomb. John is telling us the creator and bringer of life is already on the move through Genesis chapter 1. Now, at the end of the sixth day, we're told God finished his work. It says, and on the seventh day, God had finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work. But not because God was tired. The word rest here is actually royal language. Kings rested when they took their throne. We might say in Hebrew, Shabbat, commonly translated as Sabbath. But the root word means to cease or to stop. You see, creation is God's temple, and on the seventh day, the king takes his seat. So, we might more accurately say, Yom Menucha, a day of rest. And then Genesis 2 zooms in even closer. God forms a human from the dust of the ground and breathes into him the breath of life. The Hebrew word here for breath, spirit and wind is all the same word, ruach. God breathes his spirit, his ruach, into humanity. And then God places the human in a garden, Eden, a place of life, a place of blessing, a place of communion, a place where God walks with his people, a place where humanity is gifted dominion as reflectors of God's glory, a place where heaven and earth overlap, a place that God says is very good. And God gives one command. You must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. And then in Genesis 3 comes the serpent. A malevolent voice in the garden, a distortion of the truth. Did God really say? And suddenly distrust enters the story. Humanity reaches for wisdom apart from God. Autonomy becomes their desire, the need to decide for themselves what is good and what is evil. The man and woman take the fruit, and death enters God's good world. Not immediate death, but exile, a separation from the life of God. And then comes the curse. It's announced, cursed is the ground because of you. It will produce thorns and thistles. Creation itself becomes fractured. Just before humanity leaves Eden, God says, behold, the man has become like one of us. Now I want you to just hold all of that in your mind for a moment. We have a beginning in the beginning, darkness, the sixth day, breath and spirit, humanity in God's image, a garden, a seventh day, God finishing his work, God resting, death entering creation, thorns and a curse, and finally, behold the man. I wonder if we're going to encounter any of this again. Is any of this sounding familiar? Well, the answer is yes. The Apostle John absolutely wants us to see, because when he opens his gospel, he writes, in the beginning was the Word. Now that's not accidental. John is deliberately transporting us back to Genesis. And he says, The light shines in the darkness. Genesis begins in darkness before creation. John begins in darkness before new creation. And in both stories, God is about to speak life into the world again. God drenches his gospel in sevens as well. And as you move through the chapters, you will see there are 7 signs or 7 big miracles. 7 I am statements. 7 moments where Jesus echoes the divine name itself. John is practically shouting throughout his gospel. This is creation language, and this is the Creator. Something is beginning again. And then we are transported to the final week of Jesus' life in John chapter 18. After the meal in the upper room, we are told Jesus crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was a garden. A garden. Of course there's a garden. And waiting in the garden is Judas, the betrayer, the one who has opened himself up to the darkness. We have another garden, another temptation, another betrayal. Jesus is arrested, dragged before Pilate, mocked, beaten, humiliated. And John tells us the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and placed it on his head. Thorns. They're not random. They're not decorative. Jesus is bearing the curse of Eden itself. And then Pilate presents Jesus to the crowd and says, "Behold the man." Honestly, this might be one of the most important lines in the whole gospel. Because in Genesis, fallen humanity hears the line, "Behold, the man has become like one of us." But now Pilate unknowingly presents Jesus and says, "Behold the man." Without realizing it, Pilate is announcing, here is true humanity. Here is the true image bearer. Here is humanity as it was always meant to be. You see, the first Adam grasped at becoming like God. But Paul tells us in Philippians 2 that Jesus did not grasp at equality with God. The first Adam seized power. The second surrendered power. One bought death through rebellion. The other defeats death through self-giving love. And John wants us to see that. Everything lost in Eden is now being reversed in Jesus. But we're not being finished yet. Because then Jesus cries out on the cross, "It is finished." That's the same language used in Genesis when God finished creation on the 6th day. And then Jesus gives up his spirit. And John is telling us, at the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. John honestly is laying it on really thick now. And in that garden was a new tomb. So, on the 6th day, Jesus finished his work, and on the 7th day, the king rests. Not on a throne, but in a tomb. And then comes one of the most beautiful lines in all of Scripture. Early on the 1st day of the week, while it was still dark. Did you hear that? Darkness again, but this time darkness before a new creation. The first day of a brand new week. Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb and finds the stone rolled away. She runs to Peter and John, and they run, and John cannot resist telling us repeatedly that he reached the tomb first, which honestly might be one of the funniest details in the Bible. If there's ever a debate in church history about who won the race to the tomb, John wants the record to show it was him. They look inside. The grave clothes are folded, not unravelled like Lazarus's. You see, everything is deliberate, peaceful, intentional. Death has not stolen Jesus away. Jesus has walked out of the tomb under his own authority. Peter and John leave, return to the upper room, but Mary stays, weeping. And when she looks into the tomb again, she sees two angels sitting where Jesus' body had been, one at the head, one at the foot, just like the cherubim surrounding the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies, the place of atonement. And she turns, and she sees Jesus, but she doesn't recognize him. John tells us she was supposing him to be the gardener. And John is smiling, I should imagine, while he writes this, because she is wrong. And yet she's absolutely right. The gardener has returned. Eden beginning again. And then Jesus says one word. Mary. And in that moment, because Jesus said in John 10, my sheep hear my voice, I know them by name. Can you imagine that moment? She thought death had won. She thought hope was buried. She thought the story was over. And then the risen Christ speaks her name. She clings to him. Jesus tells her, go to my brothers. He doesn't say servants or failures or cowards. Go to my brothers. The disciples who abandoned him. The ones that denied him and ran from him. And then the risen Jesus restores them before they've even apologized. That is grace. And in doing this, Mary Magdalene becomes the first witness to the resurrection. In one sense, the first apostle, although she is not known as such. Just the first sent one. And in a stunning reversal of Eden, where a woman handed death to a man, now a woman carries the good news of life to the men. And I love how human this story is. John keeps mentioning who gets to the tomb first. Mary is crying. The disciples are confused. Nobody really fully understands what's happening yet. It feels real, tender, unpolished. And then Jesus appears to the disciples and says, peace be with you. And John tells us something really astonishing in that moment. And with that, Jesus breathed on them. He breathed on them. Genesis again. In Genesis, God breathed into the dust and humanity begins. In John, the risen Christ breathes on his disciples and new humanity begins. This is not merely a story about one man coming back from the dead. John is telling us a resurrection story that is bigger than resurrection alone. He is telling us the story of creation beginning again. And honestly, so many of us grew up thinking Christianity was mainly about escaping this world. Souls leaving earth for heaven in some sort of disembodied existence. But the biblical story is so much bigger than escape. The resurrection is not God abandoning creation. It is God refusing to give up on it. The New Testament tells us it's really about renewal of all things, restoration of all things, reconciliation of all things. Not evacuation, restoration. You see, the first Adam failed in a garden. The second Adam was faithful in a garden. The first Adam brought death into creation. The second Adam walked through death and defeats it from the inside. The first Adam was exiled from a garden. The second Adam opens the way back in. And now Jesus stands as the beginning of a new humanity and a renewed creation. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone. So it's not just improved behaviour, it's new creation. And that means history, it really is going somewhere. Human life is not meaningless, it's not cyclical, it is not random. History has a destination. Resurrection, renewal, restoration. The Bible ends where it began in Revelation 21. We see heaven and earth new and coming together, God dwelling amongst humanity. The creation is healed. Not God making all new things, but God making all things new. And maybe the most beautiful part of all of this is that the risen Jesus still carries the scars. You see, resurrection does not erase suffering. It redeems it. The wounds are still visible, but death no longer gets the final word. And that means your story is not meaningless either. Your grief, or your failures, or your disappointments, your wounds, none of them get the final word. Because early on the first day of a brand new week, while it was still dark, a gardener stood outside an empty tomb, and creation began again. Thank you for tuning in to the Simply Christian podcast. My name is Barry, and we hope you have enjoyed listening. And look out for episode 4 coming soon, called A Passion for Marriage. So as we finish, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance